Well, thanks for clicking the link. That means you've either got transmission problems or you're worried about getting them. Well, we've had them. We've been through the process. So hopefully I can help you a little bit in this video. We're going to talk about the symptoms. We're going to talk about the remedy. And we will look at your likely out-of-pocket expenses, what things are likely to cost you. Probably most importantly, the way that you can expect to be dealt with by Fiat and Jayco. And of course, we've picked up a few little things along the way that might be of benefit to you as well. But just before we delve into all those, we are currently in the throes of a fairly lengthy tour of the east coast of Australia. So if by the end of this you fancy the idea of coming along with us, hit the subscribe button, fire some comments at us by all means, and hopefully you might enjoy the trip with us. Anyway, let's get into the transmission issue, shall we? So it's probably best to cover what the actual problem is. Now, I can only give you my fairly basic understanding of this, and the way it's been explained to me is it's to do with the torque converter, and it's either too much power going into the torque converter or coming out of the torque converter, I'm not too sure, but essentially it puts shards of metal into the oil which damages the gearbox, simple as that. So there is a software update that Fiat have put out that's supposed to rectify this issue. Now, it's not being classed as a recall in Australia. I gather it is in other countries, but in Australia it isn't. Not at this time anyway. And basically it's been suggested that this recall will just be done at your next service. So in terms of symptoms, I guess everybody's experiences won't necessarily be the same, so I can only explain what happened to us. Now, I think the only symptoms that we got probably started about 4 or 5 days before, and it was very, very subtle. It was a very slight hesitation in accelerating, just very, very slight, and then it would suddenly kind of clear its throat and then accelerate a little bit and subsequently then change gear again. So much so that I found myself thinking, has it always done that? It was very, very subtle. So there was really nothing particularly noticeable. And then all of a sudden, about 4 or 5 days later, one day we suddenly got the red check transmission light came on the dash. That pretty much immediately went out and was replaced by the yellow check engine light, at which point, of course, you should stop and call Fiat Assist, and they will not want you to drive the car any further, and they will very likely send out a truck and transport you to the nearest Fiat professional dealer. Now, in our case, we were only about 100 k's away from Coffs Harbour, so our vehicle was taken to South Coff Motors. And all I can say is, if this happens to you and you're anywhere near South Coff Motors and you have any say in where they take it, I would suggest that would be a really good move, because they were fantastic. They were really, really good. So in terms of a remedy, there's no easy fix for this, I'm afraid. What will happen is the Fiat professionals will run their diagnostic equipment, and if it throws one particular code before the software update has been done, that effectively means a new transmission. Simple as that, there's no question. They will then approach Fiat for the relevant permissions to do so, and that generally takes a couple of days, and then of course they can order the parts. Okay, so let's talk about costs now. Now, this is where it can get a bit sticky. Because of course where this happens can play a massive part as well. If you're in the middle of the outback somewhere, miles and miles away from anywhere, then you might be out of the towing zone, and I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I have heard stories of people that have been charged big additional charges to get their motorhome back to civilization, shall we say. We were very lucky. We were very close to Coffs Harbour, as I mentioned earlier, so that wasn't an issue for us. But assuming that you are a certain distance away from home, in our case we were about 3,500 k's away from home, and I think, if I remember rightly, it's 800 kilometers. So anyway, if you're more than a certain distance away from home, Fiat Assist will offer you one of 4 options. The first one is a hire car, and I think it was $100 a day for up to 4 days, something like that. The second one was help towards accommodation costs, and that's up to $200 a day for up to 4 days. You could also opt to have money towards ongoing travel expenses, so flights if you needed to get home, for instance. Or the fourth option was to have your motorhome transported back to your home address. Now, in our case, we are travelling with another car as well, so the only thing that was relevant to us was additional accommodation expenses that we were likely to pick up. We were kind of lucky that our motorhome, when we went into Coffs Harbour, they told us that we could still drive our motorhome a very short distance to the nearest caravan park while we waited for parts to come in. It was literally about 5 minutes away, the nearest caravan park. So that's what we did. But of course, we ended up, the whole process took just over a month. So we had all those caravan park fees, and this is where I had what must be one of the craziest conversations I think I've ever had, and this was with Fiat Assist. So basically the way it went was Fiat Assist call you and they explain that what your options are. We, as I say, chose the accommodation option, and basically you pay for your accommodation and then you keep your receipts and you claim what you can claim back. So I contacted Fiat Assist and I said, look, we don't need a hotel or a motel or anything like that. We're able to stay in our motorhome, and the caravan park is effectively, let's say, $50 a night. So our allowance is up to $200 a night for up to 4 days. So I sort of, in my mind, quite naturally assumed, and I asked, is it possible then for the $800 that is effectively available to be used at the rate of $50 a night on the caravan park, and that would then last us 16 days. We pretty much guessed that the repair was going to take longer than that, obviously. And Fiat Assist said, no, we only pay for 4 days. And I said, but that doesn't make a great deal of sense. I said, we can do this for just $50 a day, not $200 a day. Surely you're not going to just pay for 4 days at $50 a day. And they said, yes, we only pay for 4 days. I said, but that means we're only being allocated $200, and surely most people would just go in a hotel or somewhere that's $200 a day. So effectively they're getting $800. I said, that doesn't seem fair. And they said, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. We only pay for 4 days. I said, so if I'm understanding right, we could go in a hotel at $200 a night for the first 4 nights and then pay for the caravan park ourselves. And they said, yes, you could do that. And I said, so you don't have a problem with paying out the $800. You will only pay it out in 4 lumps of 200. You won't pay it out in 16 lumps of 50. And he said, I'm afraid so. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I actually asked, I said, can you just put me through to the common sense department, please? And believe it or not, he said to me, I'm sorry, mate, we don't have one. So I couldn't believe that. So anyway, that was the situation that we were in at the time. So do just consider that in the period, and in our case it was just over a month, you obviously will have additional expenses. Any travelling around that you do while you're in that period is obviously going to be at your expense. Obviously you've got to feed yourself and such like, and then we've just covered what was on offer from Fiat Assist, which was pretty damn poor. So being somewhat disappointed with Fiat Assist's attitude, we decided to contact Jayco, because at the end of the day we had bought this machine from Jayco. Now we very much understand that you get 2 warranties, and anything to do with the Fiat part is dealt with by Fiat, obviously. But we decided to contact Jayco and just ask for help. and very politely said, look, we're in this situation, we've had a complete gearbox failure, and we're going to be trapped here for at least a month, and Fiat Assist are telling us that they will only pay for 4 days, and effectively we're on a caravan site that's $50 a night. Can you please help us? Would you please help us? At the end of the day, we bought this machine off you. Jayco, surprisingly, were not in the slightest bit interested. They basically said, look, you've got a problem with the Fiat, take this up with Fiat, we can't help you. They were actually bordering on rude, couldn't get off the phone fast enough, not interested, which we were gobsmacked with. I mean, at the end of the day, they took a check off us for almost $200,000, which just seems wrong, really, to just pass it off like that. So just as a Jayco related side issue, in that period that we were waiting of our transmission parts arriving, about a week later, ironically, our washing machine failed. So we went to the local Jayco dealer in Coffs Harbour, and they contacted Sphere, and Sphere said, yes, no problem, we'll replace it. So we had to wait for that coming in and for them to be available to install it, which basically kind of fell within the period that we were waiting. It just extended it a little bit, that we were waiting of the transmission. But we also found ourselves thinking that in the sort of terms and conditions of your Jayco warranty, if you have a Jayco issue, then you're entitled to some accommodation costs there as well. So basically we rang Jayco and we said, look, we've read through the terms and conditions, and if we've got some sort of Jayco related failure, I gather that we are entitled to up to $100 a day for 3 days for accommodation. So in our minds, that was something that we could potentially claim. So we thought it would just help towards the fairly crappy situation that we were getting from Fiat. They basically told us that the washing machine is not warranted by Jayco. It's under the manufacturer's warranty. Seemed very odd. So anyway, the gist of it being that we had to put our request in writing, and I've got here the email that we received back from Jayco that effectively says that our scenario does not meet the criteria to be eligible for consideration under the Jayco Assist or emergency accommodation terms. So even though our washing machine had broken, we had to wait around for, I believe it was 3 weeks, for the part to arrive and subsequently be installed by Jayco. We couldn't claim 3 days worth of accommodation, which again, gobsmacking, we thought. What do you think? So this brings me on to what did we learn from all this? What little nuggets of wisdom can we pass on that might help you? Well, I think the first thing to bear in mind is if you find yourself in this situation, it is a pretty shitty situation. There's no two ways about it. There's no point getting worked up about it. The best thing to do as far as dealing with your repairer is concerned is stay nice, stay calm. There's no point in shouting at them. They'll have to order parts. They'll have to wait for them coming. They can't install parts they haven't got. We found that being nice about everything, well, we always think being nice about everything is the way to go, and in the long run it does seem to help you. So we were actually given a little bit of advice by somebody that we bumped into along the way that had been through a similar thing, and effectively that was to ignore to a degree what Fiat Assist are telling you and go to Fiat Customer Care. Now they're actually called the Fiat Professional Customer Assistance Centre. I'll pop the phone number up on the screen. Speak to them, be nice to them, explain the situation, and if what you're asking for is realistic, and I think that's the big plus, if you're fair about it and you explain the situation and say, look, you know, this is where we're at, this is the accommodation cost that we're having to pay for, that's exactly what we did, and they were absolutely fantastic. They just listened to the story very briefly. We explained we'd been on the caravan park for just over a month, and we would like to claim back those fees, and they just basically said send us the receipts. And the following day they contacted us again and said that our claim, which was for just over $1,100, had been accepted, and could they please have our bank details. So harping back to what Fiat assist about the 4 options and the 4 days at $200 and such like, that's out the window. Ignore that. Deal with Fiat customer care or Fiat professional. Fiat, let me just check again, Fiat Professional Customer Assistance Centre. You can Google it, but here's the number once again, and they were absolutely superb. So on reflection and looking back now, I think we were very lucky. We had our issue just 100 kilometres outside of Coffs Harbour, and I don't think we could have been in a better place. We had the bonus of South Coff Motors being there. As mentioned, they were absolutely superb and just great to deal with. Our motorhome now appears to be 100%. We're back on the road, we're back mobile. The washing machine, by the way, has subsequently also been fixed and sorted, and that Jayco did a good job of that in the end. We got nowhere with accommodation costs relating to that, but that didn't really matter. So yes, so you hear horror stories about people that have had to wait 6, 8, 9, 12 weeks for transmissions and such like, and I'm not saying that that won't be the case. I just don't know. I can only tell you what happened to us. In our case, it was from the initial failure to us actually setting off again was just over a month. We were quite lucky. And I can't stress enough, if you're anywhere near South Coff Motors, go there. They were great. Just to add a little bit in here, just for entertainment purposes, during the course of this saga, we've had quite a lot of people comment on our videos, and a few people who have not been, let's say, not quite so Fiat orientated, shall we say, have suggested that Fiat stands for fix it again tomorrow and such like. Which, but purely for my own entertainment, one day I was sat having a coffee and I was just playing about with ChatGPT, and I said to ChatGPT, bearing in mind we've had a few issues with our Jayco motorhome, give me an appropriate acronym for the word Jayco. And interestingly, it came back with just accept your curse often, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. So as mentioned before, we are currently touring the East Coast. We've had all sorts of ups and downs. If you'd like to watch this story almost basically as it panned out, we've been putting videos on YouTube from when this all first happened. So if you glance back through our previous videos, you will find one about 4 or 5 videos back called Disaster Strikes, and that's where it all went pear-shaped. But if you'd like to hear things in a bit more detail and have a bit more as it happened kind of reaction from us, and just a bit more detail, by all means do that. And if you'd like to come along with us on the rest of the trip, you would be most welcome. So hopefully this has been of some use, and hopefully you don't have the problem. Fingers crossed you don't have the problem. Anyway, safe travels.